Hey everyone, welcome back to the world's worst YouTube channel. Have a little update for you today, and then in a bit I'm gonna actually hit one of the first major milestones of a Factory 5 build, and that's rolling the car out of the garage for the first time. But first, I'll talk a little bit about what I've done here. Summary is I have not done a whole lot. This doesn't really look a whole lot different than the last video, but I have done a few things. First one is I have actually sealed and torqued down the timing cover and the water pump. Before they looked like they were installed, but they weren't. I hadn't yet put some gasket maker on the gaskets and actually put them on. I'll just go over here real quick and show you what I used. If you haven't used the right stuff before, this stuff is great. And if you're looking to make a seal for a gasket maker, either water or oil, it is the right stuff. I started using that when I was working on Jaguars many years ago. We just loved it at the shop because it was basically the only thing that actually would seal for these the leaky Jaguar engines that we were working on. So I used that around the timing cover and the water pump. If you're watching this, you probably knew this already, but the timing cover has water going through it here and over here, and then the rest of it is sealing the crankcase. So you really do want to have a good seal around it the whole way, because if the crankcase isn't sealed, then it's going to leak oil, and if the water pump ports aren't sealed, it's going to leak water. Still haven't fully figured out what I'm going to do as far as my coolant hose routing goes, but I figure I got some more time for that. I'm a ways away. Looks like the intake's on. I've really just done some more fitting on it, and this is the Speedmaster Downdraft EFI intake. And so really I wanted to talk about a couple more things that I found on this intake that I wanted to point out. Got a whole lot of interest in my initial review of this and people wanting to see updates. So a couple of things I found, and with it in this position it's really easy to see all of them. So I've got ARP intake studs in here, and they're chromoly, so they're good high quality, corrosion resistant. Couple of things to note, and I'm not a big Ford guy, so if you're more familiar with Ford stuff, you're probably you probably know more about this, how this is on other engines. So first, if you look over here, this is at the front of the engine, you'll notice that this intake stud has a whole lot more thread visible than these in the center. And the reason for this is obvious, that the intake goes down over here a little bit. I really don't know why Speedmaster made the decision to have this part be higher here in the center, because if you look, it actually took a more effort and more material to raise it over here. I mean, I could see maybe around the intake ports needing to do it so that there was enough material around where they had the ports, but if you look in between the cylinders, the intake's on so you can't see it, but this whole area around here is hollow. So they only put the extra material into the casting at the cylinder pair, or at each intake port. So that's kind of to me that's sort of odd that they did it that way. And there's a couple of things that this impacts. So first one, obviously you need to have studs in the center because there's no way that you could get a bolt in here. And that part's not such a big deal. But if you note, you do not have all that much thread sticking up above the intake. So I'm sort of debating what I want to do about that, because I have to buy some new nuts for the center anyway, because the nuts that ARP sends with the stud kits are 12 point, and ordinarily I really like 12 point nuts, but obviously you can't really get in here with a 12 point. You can't get a box end socket, box end wrench in there. So 12 point's not going to work very well. I need to have a 6 point So I'm going to go buy some nuts for that. And then on the others, it'll work fine. But not too thrilled with the fairly small amount of threads that are sticking up. So I'm debating about whether, right now I've got all of the studs bottomed out as far as they'll go in the head. Debating maybe I want to have them up a little bit. I don't really like that idea either. Another thing I'm thinking about doing is just taking the Dremel for these center ones, and this is sort of a separate idea, but taking the Dremel for these in the center and just cutting this top part off just to give a little bit more clearance in here. If I do that, I could actually put the nut on in here without having to try to maneuver it while I'm lowering the intake onto the engine. So a few things for me to think about. If you have any suggestions or ideas that you think would work better, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Two other things I want to point out about this. So this over here is the throttle position sensor, flange, whatever you want to call it. This was initially over here on this back cylinder. Obviously that would not clear with this aluminum box, which is for the HVAC. So moving it, real simple, just a couple of screws, this comes off, there's a set screw for that, pull it off, and you can put it on any of the four corners wherever you want. I decided that this was probably the best place, but it's easy enough to change even with the intake on the car. So as I get into things, I may decide I want it back here. That was the other place I was debating on putting it, so I'll take a look and see. Last thing I want to point out, and this is really more specific to the Factory 5 installation, and specifically with HVAC. So I've pointed out before that there's not very much clearance back here on the passenger side behind this rearmost cylinder. And so you see I've got a bolt in here, and this is actually a 2.5 inch long bolt. I need to get a 2-inch bolt to make this work. So to back up for just a second, I can't put a stud here because there's no way to maneuver this intake into this position with a stud here. However, there is enough flexibility in the box here that I can get the nut or get a bolt in, and then I can tighten it down. But I need to get a 2-inch long bolt of this thread pitch, which I think it's 5/16 by whatever the standard coarse thread is. And I'm gonna see if I can get a hex head or an Allen key bolt, so that that would make it a little bit easier to tighten and loosen that. So that'll take care of that part easier. So I think, kind of at a high level, you know, I've said before that the Speedmaster, it's a low-cost product, and there are definitely a few areas that they could do better, but I think that they probably just didn't put quite as much thought into it because you are paying a whole lot less than you would pay for any of the other options that are available for, you know, something that's an individual throttle body intake for one of these cars. I mean, I only paid $858 for this intake, and that included the throttle bodies, the fuel rails, all of that. Oh, and I guess one last thing I'd like to point out. I'll just come over here and grab it. So the intake comes with fuel rails, and the fuel rails, and it also comes with brackets to attach the fuel rails to the intake. And so these go right over here. Well, these are sized to fit shorter injectors. I think probably the Delphi kind of injectors is standard. Ford, if you use Ford Motorsport injectors, they're longer. So I'm going to have to make new brackets. Easy enough to do, but just one more step that I have to do. If I'd known that, and I probably could have just called them and asked, but there's literally no documentation or installation instructions that come with this intake. So it doesn't say that the brackets are designed for one kind of injector versus another. If I'd known that, I probably would have just bought some Delphi injectors instead, or, you know, whatever kind it's designed for. But So if you're thinking about buying this intake, do yourself a favor, get the shorter injectors from the get-go, make things a little bit easier. That's about it. And then in a little bit I'm going to roll this car out of the garage. That'll be the first time that it's officially a roller. So thanks, and whatever you do, do not like, subscribe, or hit the bell, because this is the world's worst YouTube channel. Do you really want to watch it? But in all seriousness, there's about 76 subscribers now, I think, which I'm honestly shocked at. So thanks to those who do subscribe, and I'm glad that some of you are finding this interesting. Have a good day.